So before we start, Dave has asked me to just say a few words. Apparently, I've scared a lot of people, and I didn't intend to do it, but what I do want to do is set your minds at rest. Apparently, when I was speaking about server-side JavaScript, I scared a lot of people who have developed a lot of XBasic skills over the years. If you're in that category, if I've scared you, put your hands up so I can see who I've scared. Okay.
Be brave.
Okay. I just want to put your minds at rest. XBasic on the server is not going anywhere. XBasic on the server is still incredibly important to us. Server-side JavaScript is an option, not a requirement. We think it's going to be valuable to new users who come to the Alpha platform who don't know XBasic but who do know JavaScript. But your skills in XBasic will continue to be very valuable and usable. And also the point that I want to make is that regardless of what language you're using on the server side, it's your expertise in the Alpha objects, it's your expertise in Alpha DAO, it's your knowledge of how to create a named connection, how to open a connection, how to execute a SQL statement, how to navigate through a result set, how to create SQL arguments. That is the actual real value that you've gained in learning XBasic, and that knowledge is completely transferable to server-side JavaScript. So if you were panicked by my talk about server-side JavaScript, please don't be. So hopefully I've put everybody's minds at rest or not created new uncertainty now. But today's talk is about best practices in mobile development. But what I'd like to do before we start today's talk is just finish up a little bit from yesterday's talk, because in yesterday's talk what we did was we showed how you can use the Genie to create a list control with a detail view and a search part and turn on disconnected the disconnected properties and do all of that without doing any hand coding yourself and just using the Genie to generate the component. And then if you obviously look at the screen over here, this is where we ended up yesterday. But can I move it to the right? Okay, is that good? Okay, but basically the mobile app that I was showing looked like this. So what I want to do is I'm not going to basically go through the entire process of turning this into that, but I want to go through just sort of the basic beginning steps of how you would do that. So if we go back and look at yesterday's component, the mobile app that we showed, you can see there's our list control. And then when we tap on a row in the list control, basically we see the detail view over there, and then we have a back button that takes us back to the list control. So what I'm going to just simply do today, because I don't want to take up too much time, is show how we would go to this component over here, which was generated by the Genie, and turn this list, this component, into something that begins to resemble the fully flashed out mobile app. So let's go back to design mode. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the detail view, which is basically from there to there, and wrap it in a panel card. So I'll go there and wrap it in a panel card. And so now I've put the whole detail view in a panel card. So now that it's in a panel card, I no longer need the container that's around it. So I'll just go and delete that container. Then I'm going to go to the list control and put that in a panel card. So now I'll put that in a panel card. And then I'll go and specify that list control is going to fill the panel card, because typically when you put lists in panels, you want them to fill the entire panel. And then I'm going to go here to the search part and put that in a panel card. So I'll go there and put that in the panel card, and then delete the container that's around it. So now I've got 3 panel cards, and you can see that I'm being told that there's an error. because I'm being told now that if you've got more than one panel card, you need to put the panel card in either a panel navigator or a panel layout. So what I'm going to do now is first I want the list control to come up first, so I'm going to just move the search panel all the way to the very end, and then I'm going to take everything over here and wrap it in a panel. I'll start out by choosing just a panel. Let's go here and choose a panel navigator over there. And now if I just quickly go into working preview now, I can see now that, and let's also turn on mobile preview as well. So if I go now over to working preview, I can see the beginnings of the behavior. So there's my list control, but when I click on that list, I'm not getting to see the detail view, and also the detail view here is not, extending for the full width. So let's go back now. So next I'm going to go here and choose, say, a mobile style. Let's go and choose iOS 7. Then I'm going to go back to my controls over here, choose all of these controls, and just simply say 100%. So now those controls are going to go the full width of the screen. Then I'm going to go over here to this panel card and put in a header, and I'm going to put a back button in that, so that let's just go now and put in a button. So I'll go to other controls and put in a button, and let's go here and just say back, and I'll just choose my sub-theme of left. So I haven't put an action on it yet. And now let's go to this list control here, and now what we want to do is say when I tap on a row in the list, give focus to the detail view. So I'm going to just go to my list properties, go over to my events, and go to the on select event, and over here what I'd like to do is give focus now to panel card number 2. So I can either use Action JavaScript to do that for me if I don't know how to write the code, but luckily I do. So I'm going to just go here and say dialog dot object dot panel set active, and then just right click over there and choose panel card number 2. So that's the action that we want to do when the user clicks on a row. So now to save myself having to copy that for the back button, I'm going to just copy that to the clipboard, go there now. And now, now that I've done that, I'm going to go back to that back button that I defined. If I can just find it, there we go. And now go to this back button, go to its on-click event. So there we go. And just click over there, paste that in, and then change that now to panel card number 1. So now I'm going to just, let's go ahead and save this now. And so here you can see now, I click on a row there. Oops. I must have done something wrong. So what did I do wrong on that list? Let's see. So list events. Oh, this here should be. Yeah, that should be. Oh, maybe I got the panel cards wrong. Let's just go and see what the detail view is called. The detail view, interesting enough, is called panel card 1. So I got it backwards. So okay. So no problem. So let's go here. Go back to my list events, change this now to panel card number 1. And so this is a good reason for changing the IDs on your panels to meaningful things, right? So, and then let's go over here and then fix this one up and change this to number 2. So. And then go ahead there and save it. Now go and run it. And so, okay, so there we go. Back, click on the row there, and you can see now we've basically attributed the basic sort of behavior from the Genie into this generated code over here. So in this case, you can see that I went and I hand modified the initial component so that it looked mobile. So what Dan and I have been trying to get across is that the next iteration of alpha is that instead of the Genie leaving you looking with something that looks like sort of a web app, sort of a desktop web app, the Genie is going to go all the way and generate the full mobile app using touch forms. So the goal that we have is that by the time we're done, let's see if I can actually here show you an example over here. So this is where ultimately the next iteration will go, where you can see here when I tap on this row over here, here's my form view, and then when I tap on the individual items over here, there are our editors over there. So the next iteration, the genies will go all the way through to a full UX component with a list control, a form view over there, and editors over there without having to write code. So anyway, so now that I've sort of finished off what I wanted to show yesterday, let's switch over to talking about best practices for mobile app development. So before I start this, how many people in the room have actually started building mobile apps? Okay, so that's good. So most of you have begun building mobile apps. So what I'm going to talk about today is sort of some of the things that we've learned from looking at the questions that customers have been sending us with regard to the mobile apps that they've been building. So sort of let's start with sort of the very basics. Well, obviously the way that you build a mobile app is using the UX component. That sort of goes without saying. And you use panels in the UX component. So I know sort of that's probably somewhat of an insulting comment to make to all of you guys who've already been building mobile apps. But obviously panels and panel navigators, panel layouts, panel cards are the fundamental building blocks of how you get the mobile experience in your applications. And I've said, yeah, don't use grids and don't use tab UIs. Now, there are certainly people who are building mobile apps today that are probably designed for tablets as opposed to phones, where you are using grids and tab UIs. And you know, the reality is that they work. There's no reason that they shouldn't work. But a grid is not really designed to give you a mobile experience. The grid doesn't support drag scrolling. The grid is a much heavier object in terms of the payload that goes back and forth from the server to the client, and really it's not optimized for touch. So you really want to use you want to use list controls rather than grids when you're building mobile applications. So another really important thing in building mobile applications is keep it simple. You know, when you're working on the desktop, you've got a really powerful machine and a powerful browser, and we don't see problems with people sort of overloading the DOM on the desktop. You know, you can go to your tabbed UI. You can create a tabbed UI that has, you know, many basically components listed on the left-hand side on the menu. You can start clicking buttons, opening multiple tabs simultaneously. You can switch from one tab to the other very easily. So you've got many grids in memory all at the same time, and we just don't see memory issues. There are no DOM issues where people say my desktop application is too big. But on a mobile application, that's just not true. The mobile browser is not the same as your desktop browser running on your Pentium 7, etc. So what you want to do is keep it simple and don't overload the DOM, because the more stuff you put into the DOM, the slower the mobile application will run. So now, that being said, what I'm going to be talking about at the end of this presentation is our future direction with regard to large single-page applications, because the natural retort that you would have is, well, my application is large. I need to have a lot of stuff there. So how can Alpha accommodate my needs? So we'll be talking about what we're doing in that regard so that you can build very large applications and you sort of don't have to worry that much about how not to overload the DOM. And one of the things to keep in mind is that memory usage and DOM usage are not the same. It's quite feasible to put a lot of data into the browser without necessarily consuming a lot of the DOM. So for example, when Dan shows his Alpha Ref reader, which is a good example of this. Alpha Ref reader is a mobile application. It runs on a mobile device, but it's actually loading a huge amount of data. Basically, the Bible itself is megabytes of data, and that's all loaded into memory, but it's not all in the DOM in the same time, which is why the King James, the Alpha Ref reader application. Right.
So the DOM is the HTML things, and the rest is JavaScript objects.
Right.
That's what you're talking about.
Right.
JavaScript can have as much memory as you want.
Right.
Well, up to 100 megabytes or something. But it's the number of HTML thingies.
Right.
That's the DOM.
So basically what we're going to be working on in our next iteration to help you build large UX mobile applications is keeping most of the application in memory but not in the DOM, and dynamically loading pieces in and out of the DOM. I've seen a lot of users now who are building huge UX components to run on mobile devices, and they're not currently getting the kind of performance that they'd like, and we'd like them to get the kind of performance that they'd like, and we're going to basically make that all happen for them. So one of the ways in which people are building mobile applications right now is they're relying heavily on especially when they're trying to build big applications, is they're relying heavily on the concept of embedded UX components. So they're taking their application, breaking it down into sort of logical subsets where each logical subset is represented by its own UX component, and then they're embedding those sub-UX components into a master UX component where the embedded components are each housed or each parented in, say, a panel card or that's inside a panel navigator. So as you sort of swipe a panel card into view, that then makes an AJAX callback and loads an embedded component. Now that there's certainly nothing wrong with that pattern. However, if you do use that pattern, if you basically dynamically load UX components when a panel card goes into view, it's a good idea to clean up after yourself. So what that means is that when the panel card that came into view to load an embedded UX component goes out of focus, it's a good idea to currently go and use the destroy child method, which is a method of the UX component, to destroy that component so that it's no longer consuming DOM resources. So the key point here is that whereas on a web application running on the desktop, you don't really have to worry about that because you're not going to run into DOM issues. On a mobile device, you need to be more aware of that, and if you do use embedded components, then try, if possible, to clean up after yourself and destroy the child components. One key thing that's it's an obvious point, but I suppose it's worth mentioning, is that if you're building a disconnected application, then using the pattern of loading dynamic UX components as certain panels come into view, etc., isn't going to work, because in a disconnected application, you have to assume that there's not going to be a connection, and so you can't go back to the server to load a dynamic UX component if there's no connection. And of course, because of this fact, that sort of just reinforces the need for us to be able to support large single-page applications. And as I've said before, this is a critical issue for us on our roadmap. Responsive layouts. Now, obviously, when you're building a mobile application, the key is to have the application run seamlessly on any device that it's going to be loaded on. So that means that sometimes people will be loading your app on a phone. Sometimes they'll be loading it on a tablet. And again, even on phones now, there are many different sizes now that phones come in with. iPhones 4s, iPhone 5, iPhone 6, iPhone 6 Plus. So all of a sudden now, basically the different form factors that you need to deal with go up dramatically. So you want to basically build a responsive layout. And there are two different sort of aspects to responsive layout. There is the responsive layout genie, which I'm going to talk about. And then there is just the inherent built-in responsive features of the panel cards and panel navigators. So I'm going to just switch back to Alpha just very quickly here and demonstrate what I mean by that. So if I go now to the UX Builder over here, and I'm going to go and create a new UX component, and I'm going to choose over here one of the built-in starter templates. So I'm looking for the split view menu over here. So let's go ahead now and run this. And let me just go and save this. I'll just call it, say, split menu. And then save this and go to run mode. So what you see over here is a split view where we've got a sort of a menu system on the left-hand side and panels that represent the different pages in my application on the right-hand side. But now let me switch over into, say, mobile here and run this application now on a phone. And now you can see it looks different. The menu is not there anymore, and it becomes visible only when I tap on that icon over there, and then I can go and make my selections. But if I switch now to, say, iPad horizontal, then all of a sudden the same component now has rendered differently. So in order to do that, I did not need to go to the responsive genie to actually make that behavior happen, because that's actually just simply a built-in behavior of a panel layout. So here's my panel layout, and if you look here at the panel that contains the menu, we specified here that it is auto collapse before with a layout size of 200 pixels. So that was all that I needed to do to make this particular component have a responsive behavior. So if there's not 200 pixels of space available when I'm on a phone, then this is going to automatically collapse this panel, and it'll only become visible when I tap on the button. So that's an example of how you can use the built-in responsive sort of behavior of the panel layouts and the panel navigators, etc. But in sort of real-world applications, you need to do much more than that. For example, what Dan described yesterday is when you're on a phone, you might like your, if you've got, say, for example, 2 panel cards in a panel layout, when you're on a tablet, you might like those 2 panel cards to lay out from left to right. But when you're on a phone, you might like those 2 panels to lay out from top to bottom. So that's an example of a responsive design where you would use the responsive design genie. You'd go over here to properties, and then you'd switch over to responsive design, and you would design your rule set where you can define an arbitrary complex set of rules to define different layouts that you want your code base, your UX component to render using, when these different rules are in place. So let's go back now. So I've discussed sort of built-in responsive behavior versus responsive rules. Lists. Obviously, if you're building a mobile application, lists are the core building block of mobile applications. So one of the really important things when you're building a mobile app, in order to be, to keep your performance good, in order to sort of minimize your DOM impact, is if you have large lists, you definitely want to use list virtualization. So list virtualization means that you can still have many rows of data in the list. You could have thousands of rows of data in the list, but you can still have very good performance by using virtualization. And what that means is that only certain of the rows that are in memory are actually in the DOM. And so I'll do a quick demonstration of that. So now with list virtualization, you can have very, very large lists, thousands of rows of data in memory, but it's a painful user experience to make the user swipe through a list, for ages to try to get, say, to the bottom of the list. So Alpha has a really great concept called list scrollers, which let you scroll through virtualized lists really, really quickly. Lists themselves have a DOM impact. So we've seen a lot of applications where users have put 10 and 20 and 30 lists into a UX component and seen the performance degrade when they could have used things like templates instead of lists, because templates give you a lot of the same behavior that lists have. That, in other words, they're scrollable, they can display data, but they have a much lighter DOM impact. So if possible, use templates. And then free-form lists versus columnar lists make a lot of sense in a mobile app, because in a mobile app, you typically don't have a lot of room for a lot of discrete columns, and the pattern that you mostly see are free-form lists where basically each row of the list has sort of a discrete layout. Dave, I'm running out of time. Is 2 minutes? Okay. All right. So let me just quickly go and give a quick demonstration of what I mean by virtualized lists. So I'm going to go back here to Alpha really quickly over here. And let's cancel out of here. Go over to Web Projects. And what I have over here is a demo of a list. I have two lists here, one of which I'm going to use list virtualization, and one of which I'm going to basically populate the entire list. And I'm going to go over here and generate some random data. So when I press this button here, I've just generated 1,000 rows of random data. So first of all, you can see that just putting 1,000 rows of data into memory, but not the DOM, is really quick. JavaScript is fantastic over here. And now I'm going to go here and click a button that populates this bottom list using the non-virtualized approach. So when I do that, you'll see it takes a fair amount of time to populate that list, whereas if I do virtualized, it's instantaneous. But now, if I go now and change it from, say, 1,000 rows, let's go here and change it now to, say, 10,000 rows. So now I'm going to have 10,000 rows of data, and go back now to this list. So I'm going to generate 10,000 rows over there. So there's 10,000 rows of random data. I'm going to populate the list using virtualized option, and you can see here that, that non-virtual, I pressed the non-virtualized button. Well, it's going to take some time now because it's populating non-virtualized. So this is a good example. I didn't mean to press this button because I knew it would take a long time. So that was a mistake. So now we're populating 10,000 rows into the DOM. This is a great demonstration of why you don't want to do this. So the browser is just not going to finish. So what I'm going to do is just quickly kill this and start again. So let's just go there and kill that. And this time I'll be really careful to press the virtualized button, not the non-virtualized button. All right, so let's see if I can get this right this time now. So go over here. How many rows of data do I have? Okay, go over to working preview now. Generate the random data, and now populate the list. And there you go. So basically, virtualized lists are great, but now this list's got 10,000 rows of data, so getting to the very bottom is going to be a huge pain in the neck. So let's go over here and look at the scroller here really quickly. So we'll go over there now, And now I'm going to generate 10,000 rows, so generate the data. Now go ahead now and populate the list. There's 10,000 rows of data in this list, but you can see now using the scroller, I can navigate really quickly. Let's just make this bigger. I can navigate all the way to the very end of the list very quickly using my scroller over here. So there we go. So now I'm at the very end of the list. So scrollers are a really important part of using virtualized lists. So I guess I'm done. I didn't finish the presentation, sorry, but are there any questions that you'd like to ask?
Does that scroller have 2 speeds?
Yes, basically, if you, I forget exactly how, if you click and hold, now when you get into this part now you're scrolling slowly. Okay, so it's built in 2 speeds on the scroller, and you've got complete control over the template. In other words, what's shown in the scroller is it's all template driven. So you can put any HTML that you want and any styling that you want as well. Yeah. Well, the thing is that are the images basically going to be base64 encoded in the list data itself, or are the images just references to resources on disk? If they're base64 encoded data and they're in the list, they're going to bloat the list. If they're just simply references to resources on the server, it's going to have no impact on the speed. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Basically, searching on a list, as I mentioned yesterday, can either be client-side or server-side. But then let's take the case where we've got a virtualized list of, say, 100,000 rows, and you want to do searching. So that would be you would do client-side searching. I guarantee you that you won't even be able to blink before the search is complete. In other words, in Dan's demonstration, when he showed AlphaRef Reader and he was searching through the Bible for the word dog, he was searching through megabytes of data, and it was all happening in real time. So the point about JavaScript is that it's unbelievably fast. It's fantastic. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff, I can't hear.
In the question of templates versus lists,
Yeah.
are templates in the preview?
Templates have been in the product ever since, I think, version 2. So templates have been there for quite some time now. They keep getting better, but they've been there for some time now. Yeah.
How did you set up that virtual list?
The virtual list is set up by just going into the list properties, and there's a property in list properties called list virtualization. There we go, dynamic over there. So I set the list virtualization property to dynamic, and I also set the scroller. There's a property for use scroller over there as well. So those are 2 properties that are in the list itself.
So I've heard that we will have some time at the end at 3 o'clock if you want to finish that
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, great.
Up right now is Bob Moore, who will be talking about app publishing and iOS certificates, provisioning, publishing, and demystification of all of these topics.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, Alan.